A city stood at the crossroads of two continents, a jewel perched between Europe and Asia, a bastion of Christian Byzantium for over a millennium. Its walls had withstood countless sieges, its streets had echoed with the footfalls of emperors and traders alike, and its churches had witnessed centuries of faith and devotion. Yet, in the spring of 1453, this city, Constantinople, would face an enemy unlike any it had seen before. The siege that ensued would mark not only the fall of an empire, but a turning point in world history, one whose ripples would be felt for centuries to come. Hello and welcome to The Other Side Stories. Here we travel beyond the usual headlines to explore the untold tales of world history, mysteries, turning points, and hidden connections that shaped our planet. If you love discovering how the past still echoes in our present, you're in the right place. Let's uncover the other side of history together. Constantinople had been the capital of the Byzantine Empire for more than 1,000 years. Founded by Constantine the Great in 330 AD on the site of the ancient city of Byzantium, it was designed to be a new Rome, a city fortified against invaders, rich in culture, and central to the Christian world. Its walls were legendary, triple layers of stone and brick that had repelled Huns, Avars, Slavs, and even Arab armies during the centuries when Byzantium was at its height. The city's location was strategic, commanding the Bosporus Strait, linking the Black Sea to the Mediterranean. It was a hub of commerce, diplomacy, and culture. By the mid-15th century, however, Constantinople was a shadow of its former glory. The Byzantine Empire had been shrinking for centuries, reduced to little more than the city itself and some surrounding territories. Its military resources were depleted, its treasury drained, and its population had dwindled after years of war, plague, and famine. The city's once glorious mosaics and churches, including the awe-inspiring Hagia Sophia, still stood as symbols of faith and resilience, but their presence could not hide the vulnerability of the empire they represented. On the other side of the Bosporus, a new power had been rising. The Ottoman Turks, led by Sultan Mehmed II, were a dynamic and formidable force. Mehmed, known later as the Conqueror, ascended the throne at a young age and quickly demonstrated his ambition. He envisioned an empire stretching across the Balkans, Anatolia, and beyond, a world in which Constantinople could no longer serve as a Christian barrier between Europe and Asia. The city, once an impregnable bastion, became the focus of his ambitions. Mehmed's preparations were meticulous. He invested heavily in artillery, commissioning the creation of massive cannons designed specifically to break through the formidable walls of Constantinople. Among these was the famous basilica, a giant bombard that could hurl stone projectiles weighing several hundred kilograms. Such firepower was unprecedented in European warfare and represented the cutting-edge military technology of the time. Mehmed also built a fleet to blockade the city by sea, ensuring that no reinforcements or supplies could reach the beleaguered Byzantines. Constantinople, once an impregnable bastion, became the focus of his ambitions. On the other side of the Bosporus, Mehmed's preparations were meticulous. He invested heavily in artillery, commissioning the creation of massive cannons designed specifically to break through the formidable walls of Constantinople. Among these was the famous basilica, a giant bombard that could hurl stone projectiles weighing several hundred kilograms. Such firepower was unprecedented in European warfare and represented the cutting-edge military technology of the time. Mehmed also built a fleet to blockade the city by sea, ensuring that no reinforcements or supplies could reach the beleaguered Byzantines. Inside the walls, Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos faced an impossible dilemma. The city's defenders numbered only a few thousand, including seasoned soldiers and local militia, compared to the tens of thousands in Mehmed's army. Still, Constantine XI was resolute. He organized the city's defenses, repaired walls where possible, and called for aid from Western Europe. Papal emissaries urged Christian kingdoms to send help, framing the siege as a final stand of Christendom. Knights, mercenaries, and volunteers arrived, including the famed Genoese commander Giovanni Giustiniani, whose leadership would prove critical in bolstering the city's defensive lines. The siege began in early April 1453. Ottoman forces encircled the city, cutting off all land and sea routes. Mehmed's artillery pounded the walls relentlessly, day and night, testing the strength of the ancient fortifications. The Byzantines responded with ingenuity, hurling projectiles, pouring boiling oil, and using small cannons where available. Each assault was met with fierce resistance. For weeks, the city held, as defenders repelled attacks and patched breaches as quickly as they appeared. Despite their courage, the defenders faced mounting challenges. Food and water were limited, morale fluctuated, and the psychological strain of continuous bombardment took its toll. Each day, the Ottoman forces tested different sections of the walls, probing for weaknesses, while their artillery creating terrifying holes in the stone. The defenders realized that time was not on their side. The longer the siege continued, the more desperate their situation became. Mehmed, however, was patient and calculated. He rotated his troops, managed logistics meticulously, and sought to demoralize the defenders through psychological warfare. His use of massive cannons, including the enormous basilica, represented more than just brute force. They were a statement of technological dominance. Reports of the giant bombard reverberating across the city struck fear in the hearts of Constantinople's citizens. The walls that had repelled armies for centuries now shuddered under the firepower of a new era. As the siege wore on, efforts to break the blockade emerged. Western European ships attempted to relieve the city, navigating the treacherous waters of the Golden Horn, but Ottoman control of the sea proved decisive. Mehmed even demonstrated remarkable tactical ingenuity by transporting ships over land to bypass chain defenses in the harbor, a feat that astonished contemporaries. With the harbor effectively neutralized, Constantinople's isolation was complete. Inside the city, everyday life became a struggle for survival. Civilians joined in the defense, armed with whatever they could find, and churches became centers of refuge and coordination. The Hagia Sophia, once a spiritual sanctuary, transformed into a fortress and rallying point. Citizens prayed, prepared supplies, and sought courage from the symbols of their faith, knowing that their city's fate rested on the slim margins of courage, ingenuity, and luck. May 1453 arrived, and Mehmed escalated the final phase of his assault. For days, waves of Ottoman troops launched coordinated attacks on multiple points along the walls. Despite exhaustion, the defenders fought valiantly, holding back the tide through sheer determination. But the Ottomans had numbers, artillery, and strategy on their side. They maintained pressure across every section of the walls, gradually wearing down the defenders and exploiting even the smallest breaches. The pivotal moment came on the morning of May 29th. After weeks of relentless bombardment, one section of the wall near the St. Romanus Gate collapsed under the force of the basilica and other artillery. Ottoman troops poured into the breach, overwhelming the defenders through sheer force. Constantine XI, witnessing the fall, is said to have thrown off his imperial regalia and joined the fight on the walls. In a final act of defiance, he fell in battle, disappearing into the chaos, his body never definitively identified. As Ottoman forces flooded the city, looting and destruction ensued. Yet, Mehmed was also calculated. He sought to establish order quickly, claiming Constantinople as his new imperial capital and initiating policies that would integrate the city into the Ottoman Empire. Churches were converted into mosques, including the magnificent Hagia Sophia, and the population faced new realities under Ottoman rule. Despite the violence of conquest, Mehmed also encouraged repopulation and reconstruction, envisioning a city that would thrive as the heart of his empire. The fall of Constantinople reverberated far beyond the city walls. In Europe, the shock was profound. The event marked the definitive end of the Byzantine Empire, the last remnant of the Roman world. Scholars, clergy, and rulers recognized that the balance of power had shifted irrevocably. Trade routes to the east were disrupted, prompting European nations to seek new passages for commerce, one of the many indirect catalysts for the age of exploration. The siege demonstrated the lethal potential of gunpowder artillery, signaling a transformation in military strategy and fortification design across the continent. Historians have debated the long-term consequences of the fall. Some emphasize its role in encouraging European exploration, leading to the discovery of the Americas and the establishment of global trade networks. Others focus on the cultural migration, as Greek scholars fled westward, bringing with them classical knowledge that would fuel the Renaissance. The fall also underscored the vulnerability of established powers to technological innovation and strategic planning, a lesson that resonates in military and political contexts even today. For the citizens of Constantinople who survived, life under Ottoman rule was a mixture of adaptation and continuity. Many aspects of the city's culture, architecture, and administration persisted, albeit transformed under Islamic governance. Over time, Constantinople, renamed Istanbul, emerged as a thriving metropolis, bridging cultures and continents. The siege remains a symbol of the dramatic shifts in history, where empires rise and fall not solely through immediate military might, but through a combination of technological innovation, strategic vision, and circumstance. The story of Constantinople's last stand, the aftermath of the conquest, was both immediate and enduring. Sultan Mehmed II, having secured Constantinople, did not allow the city to fall into chaos. He immediately established his court within the former imperial palace, asserting Ottoman authority while simultaneously fostering the revival of commerce and culture. Markets reopened, trade resumed, and craftsmen, both local and from surrounding regions, were encouraged to settle in the city. The strategic location that had once made Constantinople a prize for conquerors now became a cornerstone for Ottoman economic and political expansion. Mehmed understood that the legitimacy of his reign over such a significant and symbolically important city required more than brute force. It required governance, diplomacy, and vision. He proclaimed himself the Kaiser-i-Rum, or Caesar of Rome, linking his authority to the legacy of the Roman Empire, and thereby seeking to inherit the prestige of Constantinople. By asserting continuity with the Byzantine past, Mehmed positioned himself not merely as a conqueror, but as a successor to a centuries-old tradition of imperial authority. The psychological impact on Europe was profound. News of the fall traveled quickly, carried by merchants, diplomats, and refugees. Fear spread across the continent as Western powers realized that a dynamic, disciplined, and technologically advanced Ottoman Empire now controlled the gateway between East and West. Scholars fled westward, taking precious manuscripts with them, while political leaders debated strategies to counter the growing Ottoman influence. Among the intellectuals who relocated were Greek scholars who contributed significantly to the Renaissance, bringing with them knowledge of classical literature, philosophy, and scientific texts that had been preserved within Byzantine libraries. The siege also demonstrated a paradigm shift in military tactics. For centuries, the formidable walls of Constantinople had seemed invincible, an emblem of medieval fortification mastery. However, the effective use of large-scale artillery, particularly the massive cannons commissioned by Mehmed II, had broken the traditional belief in the impregnability of stone walls. Military architects across Europe studied the siege, learning lessons in both offense and defense that would influence the design of fortresses, city walls, and siegecraft for decades. Gunpowder had arrived as a game-changing force, and Constantinople had become its theater of revelation. Yet the human story within the city remained poignant. While Mehmed's forces established control, the population faced enormous suffering. Many perished during the storming of the walls, and countless families were displaced or enslaved. Churches, homes, and public buildings were looted, yet the city's cultural memory persisted. Citizens adapted to Ottoman governance, negotiating their survival through commerce, skills, or integration into the new social order. The resilience of Constantinople's population highlights the enduring capacity of human communities to survive, adapt, and even flourish under radically changed circumstances. The Hagia Sophia, which had stood as the spiritual heart of Byzantium, became one of the most visible symbols of change. Converted into a mosque, its massive dome and intricate mosaics, though many Christian images were later plastered over, remained a testament to both architectural genius and the continuity of civic identity under a new regime. For Muslims, it became a central religious site. For Christians, it stood as a reminder of both loss and the endurance of human achievement. The transformation of Hagia Sophia encapsulated the complex layering of conquest, adaptation, and cultural legacy that would define the city for centuries. Mehmed's policies toward the conquered population were pragmatic. While many were enslaved or displaced, he also encouraged migration to repopulate the city, attracting artisans, traders, and scholars from diverse regions. This influx reinvigorated the economy and facilitated the blending of cultures, languages, and traditions. Over time, Constantinople evolved into a cosmopolitan metropolis, bridging Europe and Asia, Christian and Muslim communities under a single administrative framework. The city became a symbol not only of conquest, but of synthesis, demonstrating the capacity of urban centers to absorb and adapt to dramatic demographic and political change. The fall of Constantinople also had long-term consequences for maritime trade. The Ottoman control of the Bosphorus and Dardanelles Straits disrupted traditional routes between Europe and Asia, compelling European nations to seek alternative passages to the east. Portugal, Spain, and later the Dutch and English invested heavily in maritime exploration, leading to the discovery of sea routes to India, Southeast Asia, and eventually the Americas. In this sense, the fall of Constantinople indirectly accelerated the age of exploration, reshaping global trade networks and initiating an era of European expansion that would profoundly affect societies across the globe. Military innovation, too, was accelerated. European powers studied Mehmed's siege techniques, particularly the use of artillery in breaching city walls. Fortification design evolved rapidly. Star forts and angled bastions were developed to counteract the power of gunpowder artillery. Siegecraft became more sophisticated, and the scale and engineering of cannons advanced in response. In many ways, the fall of Constantinople marked the transition from medieval to early modern warfare, showcasing how technology, leadership, and strategy could converge to overcome seemingly insurmountable defenses. Within the Ottoman Empire, Constantinople became both a capital and a symbol. Mehmed invested in urban planning, establishing public works, mosques, palaces, and marketplaces. The city's geographical advantages were leveraged for both defense and trade. Over the following decades, the Ottomans fortified the city further, combining Byzantine architectural knowledge with contemporary military engineering. The Golden Horn, once a critical defensive harbor, now became a hub of commerce and naval power. Through careful planning and investment, Constantinople transitioned from a beleaguered city to the heart of one of the most powerful empires in history. Religious and cultural transformations were equally significant. The integration of Islamic institutions, including madrasas and mosques, into the city's fabric created a distinct identity that blended Ottoman governance with the legacy of Byzantine civilization. Christian communities persisted under Ottoman rule, often with relative autonomy, contributing to a multicultural urban landscape. This blending of traditions illustrates how conquest was not solely destructive. It could also facilitate cultural dialogue, adaptation, and synthesis, producing new forms of social and artistic expression. The symbolic impact of the fall extended to Europe's perception of security and power. The collapse of Constantinople was a stark reminder that even the most storied empires could succumb to determined, technologically advanced foes. Rulers were forced to rethink alliances, invest in military innovation, and contemplate the vulnerability of their own territories. The fear generated by the event also reinforced religious and political unity in certain regions, as Western powers sought to present a coordinated response to the Ottoman threat, even if such efforts were often limited by internal division. Over time, historians and chroniclers would reflect on the siege in varied ways. Some depicted the defenders as heroic martyrs, fighting valiantly against overwhelming odds. Others emphasized the genius of Mehmed II as a strategist and visionary leader. Eyewitness accounts, letters, and official reports provide vivid insights into the human experiences of the siege. Courage, despair, ingenuity, and adaptation all intertwined in the crucible of history. These narratives allow modern readers to appreciate not only the geopolitical ramifications, but the deeply human dimension of the event. Trade and commerce, too, experienced a significant shift. Venetian and Genoese merchants, who had long profited from their access to Byzantine markets, had to recalibrate their operations under Ottoman authority. While the Ottomans eventually allowed trade to continue under regulated terms, the initial shock disrupted traditional economic networks. European nations accelerated maritime ventures, seeking direct access to spices, silk, and other valuable commodities. In this way, the fall of Constantinople indirectly propelled global economic transformation, influencing patterns of wealth, power, and cultural exchange for centuries. The artistic and architectural legacy of the city also evolved. Byzantine mosaics, domes, and engineering knowledge were preserved in various ways, influencing Ottoman architecture. Mosques constructed during the 15th and 16th centuries incorporated elements of Byzantine design, including massive domes, intricate stonework, and spatial organization inspired by Hagia Sophia. This synthesis of styles created a distinct architectural identity for Istanbul, blending the past with the present and demonstrating the lasting influence of Byzantine craftsmanship even under new governance. The human dimension of the fall, particularly the experiences of ordinary citizens, reflects resilience in adversity. Families faced displacement, loss of property, and the upheaval of long-established social networks. Yet communities adapted, navigating the new political and social realities imposed by Ottoman rule. Over generations, these communities integrated into the fabric of the empire, contributing to the city's cultural vibrancy and diversity. Their stories remind us that history is shaped not only by emperors and sultans, but by the countless individuals who endure, adapt, and influence the course of events in ways often overlooked by traditional narratives. Education and knowledge transfer were also affected. Greek scholars who fled Constantinople brought with them classical texts, scientific treatises, and philosophical works that enriched the... As the city of Constantinople transitioned under Ottoman rule, the world observed a striking example of resilience and transformation. The once Byzantine capital, though conquered, did not vanish into obscurity. Instead, it emerged as a vibrant hub of administration, commerce, and culture, now at the center of one of history's most powerful empires. Sultan Mehmed II's vision extended beyond conquest. He sought to establish a capital that could rival the grandeur of Rome itself, blending the legacies of past empires with the dynamic energy of the Ottoman state. The demographic composition of the city changed dramatically. Mehmed encouraged the migration of populations from Anatolia, the Balkans, and beyond, aiming to repopulate areas devastated by siege and warfare. Communities of artisans, traders, scholars, and farmers were settled within the city walls, creating a mosaic of ethnicities, languages, and religions. This deliberate repopulation strategy was both practical and symbolic. It revitalized the economy while demonstrating the Sultan's authority and vision for a cosmopolitan empire. Education and religion became pillars of Mehmed's administration. Islamic schools, or madrasas, were established to educate future bureaucrats and religious leaders, while Christian communities retained certain degrees of autonomy under the millet system, allowing them to govern their internal affairs and maintain religious practices. This careful balancing of religious authority exemplifies the pragmatism of Ottoman governance. While conquest had imposed new political realities, cultural and religious continuity provided stability for the city's population, fostering coexistence in a complex urban environment. Economically, Constantinople's fall reshaped trade networks across Europe and Asia. The city's strategic location on the Bosporus remained invaluable, but European merchants had to adapt to Ottoman control over critical maritime and overland routes. Venice and Genoa, long dominant in Mediterranean trade, negotiated privileges with the Ottoman court to maintain access to markets. Simultaneously, the closure of traditional trade routes spurred European exploration. Nations such as Portugal and Spain invested heavily in maritime technology, navigation, and long-distance voyages, seeking direct sea routes to India, China, and the spice-rich islands of Southeast Asia. In this way, the fall of Constantinople indirectly catalyzed the Age of Discovery, transforming global commerce and intercultural exchange. Artistic and architectural innovation flourished under these new conditions. Ottoman architects drew inspiration from Byzantine engineering, particularly the Hagia Sophia's monumental dome and interior spatial arrangements. Early Ottoman mosques, including those commissioned by Mehmed II, reflected an understanding of Byzantine aesthetics while integrating Islamic design principles. This synthesis produced a distinctive Ottoman architectural identity that would define Istanbul's skyline for centuries. The streets, markets, and public spaces became theaters for cultural exchange, blending traditions from East and West. The psychological and cultural impact on Europe was equally profound. Scholars, clergy, and ordinary citizens experienced shock and fear at the news of Constantinople's fall. The loss of the Byzantine Empire, long considered the bulwark of Christendom in the East, heightened awareness of the Ottoman threat. Papal appeals for a crusade reflected both desperation and determination, though internal European conflicts often prevented a coordinated military response. The sense of vulnerability prompted innovation in fortifications, military strategy, and naval technology across European kingdom. Warfare was entering a new era where gunpowder and large-scale artillery would redefine traditional notions of defense and offense. For the surviving citizens of Constantinople, life under Ottoman rule was marked by adaptation and resilience. Families reconstituted their communities, tradesmen established businesses within Ottoman regulations, and artisans contributed to the city's revival. The population gradually stabilized, and over decades, the city emerged as a vital cultural and economic hub, reflecting the successful integration of diverse peoples. These human stories reveal the layers of continuity beneath the surface of conquest. While empires may fall, human ingenuity and adaptability endure. The fall also had profound implications for the preservation and dissemination of knowledge. Greek scholars fleeing Constantinople brought with them manuscripts and philosophical treatises, influencing the intellectual climate of Renaissance Italy. Universities and academies absorbed this influx of knowledge, fostering advances in mathematics, astronomy, literature, and the arts. The migration of knowledge demonstrates how the aftermath of conquest can have unintended yet transformative consequences for distant regions. What began as a military catastrophe for one society became an intellectual boon for another. The military significance of the siege continued to resonate across Europe. Fortress design evolved rapidly in response to the lessons of Constantinople. Medieval city walls, once sufficient to withstand armies armed with swords and catapults, became obsolete against the destructive power of heavy artillery. Star forts, angled bastions, and earthworks became standard elements in military architecture, reflecting a growing understanding of gunpowder's transformative potential. Generations of engineers studied Mehmed's siege, analyzing the combination of artillery, logistics, and tactical planning that had made the Ottoman victory possible. Cultural transformations within the city were evident in daily life. Markets thrived as merchants from diverse regions converged on the Bosporus, bringing textiles, spices, ceramics, and luxury goods. The blending of languages, customs, and religious practices created a dynamic urban environment. Festivals, religious ceremonies, and public gatherings reflected the multiplicity of traditions present in Istanbul, creating a sense of shared civic identity under a new political order. Over time, this hybrid culture became a hallmark of the city, drawing visitors and scholars from across the empire. Sultan Mehmed II's personal vision for the city was both pragmatic and symbolic. By integrating Byzantine architectural knowledge with Ottoman urban planning, he crafted a city capable of supporting imperial administration, military readiness, and cultural life. Palaces, mosques, and public works were constructed to signal Ottoman power, while simultaneously accommodating the needs of citizens. The Golden Horn, once a critical defensive harbor, transformed into a bustling center for trade and naval activity, ensuring that the city remained strategically and economically vital. The fall of Constantinople also influenced religious and philosophical thought across Europe. The collapse of a Christian stronghold prompted theological reflection on divine providence, human courage, and the nature of political power. Some interpreted the event as a punishment for internal disunity, while others emphasized the necessity of adapting to emerging realities. These debates influenced political theory, diplomacy, and strategies of governance, illustrating how military events can reverberate far beyond the battlefield into the realms of ideology and culture. Over the decades, Istanbul evolved into the heart of a vast empire, bridging continents, languages, and faiths. The transformation of Constantinople into Istanbul represents a case study in the complex interplay of conquest, governance, and urban adaptation. Under Mehmed and his successors, the city flourished as a political, cultural, and economic hub. Its story illustrates how human communities can recover from catastrophe, adapt to new rulers, and ultimately thrive in transformed conditions. Trade routes extending from the city connected Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, facilitating commerce in silk, spices, precious metals, and other goods. Ottoman policies encouraged both local and international merchants to participate in this economic network, integrating the city into a global web of exchange. This strategic economic integration ensured that the city remained both prosperous and influential, underscoring Mehmed II's foresight in shaping Istanbul's role in the broader imperial structure. The intellectual impact of the fall cannot be overstated. Greek scholars, historians, and philosophers carried manuscripts that preserved classical knowledge, which might otherwise have been lost. Their arrival in Western Europe accelerated developments in philosophy, science, and literature, contributing to the flourishing of the Renaissance. Works by Plato, Aristotle, and other classical thinkers became widely accessible, reshaping education, intellectual discourse. The fall of Constantinople thus represents a paradox. A devastating loss in one context became a source of cultural enrichment in another. The Siege of 1453 also underscores the role of individual agency in shaping history. Sultan Mehmed II's strategic foresight, innovative use of artillery, and diplomatic acumen were decisive in the Ottoman victory. Emperor Constantine XI's courage, leadership, and commitment to his city exemplify the human dimensions of defense and resistance. The actions of commanders, citizens, and even artisans and scholars contributed to the unfolding narrative. History is often remembered through grand events, but it is also shaped by countless individual choices, sacrifices, and adaptations. The fall of Constantinople remains a powerful symbol in modern memory. It represents the end of an era, the resilience of human communities in the face of overwhelming force, and the transformative potential of technological and strategic innovation. The city's evolution under Ottoman rule illustrates the capacity for societies to recover, integrate diverse populations, and thrive in new political and cultural contexts. As a case study, it demonstrates the interconnectedness of military, economic, cultural, and intellectual developments in shaping the course of history. The transformation of Constantinople into Istanbul also brought new administrative and social structures that reinforced Ottoman authority. Mehmed II implemented a sophisticated bureaucracy to manage taxation, trade, and civil order. The Devshirme system, which collected young boys from Christian families to serve in the Ottoman administration or military, provided a steady supply of loyal officials and soldiers, further consolidating the Sultan's control over the city and the wider empire. This system, though controversial, became a critical element of Ottoman governance, integrating human resources from conquered territories into the empire's institutional framework. Education and religious life flourished under the Ottoman regime, albeit in altered forms. Islamic madrasas educated future leaders, while Christian communities were allowed a degree of autonomy through the millet system. This pragmatic approach helped maintain stability in a culturally and religiously diverse urban environment. Religious leaders and scholars played crucial roles in mediating between the state and local communities, ensuring that traditions and social cohesion persisted even amidst political upheaval. The coexistence of different faiths and the incorporation of diverse populations into the city's social fabric exemplify the adaptive strategies that allowed Istanbul to flourish over subsequent centuries. Trade and commerce rapidly expanded under Ottoman auspices. Merchants from across the Mediterranean, Middle East, and Asia converged on the city, transforming it into a hub of global exchange. The Bosporus remained a critical maritime artery, linking the Black Sea to the Mediterranean and facilitating the flow of goods, ideas, and people. Markets, known as bazaars, thrived as centers of economic activity, hosting everything from luxury textiles and spices to local crafts. This commercial vitality not only reinforced the city's strategic importance, but also fostered a dynamic cultural environment where diverse traditions interacted and evolved. The influence of the fall extended far beyond the Mediterranean. European nations, startled by the Ottoman consolidation of Constantinople, intensified their exploration efforts. The disruption of traditional overland trade routes to Asia prompted nations like Portugal and Spain to seek maritime alternatives, directly contributing to the discovery of new lands, new trade routes, and ultimately the establishment of European colonies across the globe. In this way, the fall of Constantinople indirectly reshaped the trajectory of global history, highlighting the interconnectedness of political events, technological advances, and economic imperatives. Military strategy underwent profound evolution following the siege. European powers recognized that traditional medieval fortifications were inadequate against heavy artillery. The lessons learned from Mehmed II's deployment of massive cannons informed the design of fortresses, city walls, and military engineering throughout Europe. Star forts and bastion designs became standard, demonstrating the long-lasting impact of Constantinople's fall on the conduct of warfare. The siege underscored the significance of logistics, intelligence, and psychological warfare, revealing that strategic innovation could outweigh mere numerical superiority. Cultural synthesis became a defining feature of the city in the decades following the conquest. Ottoman architects incorporated Byzantine elements into mosque construction, creating buildings that honored the city's historical legacy while asserting the new Islamic aesthetic. Public spaces blended traditions from East and West, offering a platform for cultural expression, economic activity, and social interaction. The city became a living laboratory of human adaptation, demonstrating the creative potential inherent in the convergence of diverse traditions and experiences. The role of ordinary citizens in shaping post-conquest Istanbul cannot be overstated. Survivors of the siege navigated a transformed political landscape, rebuilding neighborhoods, establishing businesses, and contributing to cultural life. Craftsmen adapted their skills to meet new demands, scholars preserved and transmitted knowledge, and traders leveraged emerging networks to participate in global commerce. Their resilience and ingenuity transformed the city from a site of destruction into a thriving metropolis, illustrating the human capacity to adapt, innovate, and flourish despite adversity. The fall of Constantinople also had enduring symbolic significance. It marked the definitive end of the Byzantine Empire, closing the chapter on one of history's most enduring civilizations. For the Christian world, it was a moment of profound shock and reflection, inspiring both theological contemplation and military reform. For the Ottoman Empire, it represented the realization of a strategic and ideological vision, a city at the heart of a vast, multi-ethnic, multi-religious empire. The juxtaposition of loss and triumph, despair and renewal underscores the complexity of historical events and the multifaceted consequences of conquest. Architectural innovation in Istanbul reflects this transformative period. Ottoman builders drew inspiration from Byzantine domes, arches, and structural techniques, while integrating Islamic decorative motifs, creating a distinct urban aesthetic. Mosques, public buildings, and palaces were designed not only for functionality, but to convey imperial power, cultural synthesis, and aesthetic refinement. This architectural fusion stands as a testament to the enduring influence of Byzantine engineering and the creative adaptation of conquered traditions. The intellectual ramifications of the fall were equally profound. Greek scholars fleeing Constantinople carried with them manuscripts of classical philosophy, science, and literature. Their arrival in Western Europe helped accelerate the Renaissance, spreading knowledge of Aristotle, Plato, and other classical thinkers to new audiences. The migration of intellectual resources demonstrates how cultural preservation and dissemination can occur even in the wake of catastrophic change, highlighting the unintended but transformative consequences of conflict. Trade patterns shifted significantly after 1453. European merchants had to negotiate access with Ottoman authorities, leading to new commercial relationships and the development of diplomatic networks. Venetian and Genoese traders, long dominant in Mediterranean commerce, adjusted their strategies to accommodate Ottoman oversight. Meanwhile, European nations invested in maritime technology, navigation, and exploration, seeking alternative routes to Asia. The ripple effects of Constantinople's fall extended across continents, influencing economic strategies, geopolitical alliances, and global trade for centuries. The Ottoman approach to governance in Istanbul combined military, administrative, and social strategies. The devshirme system, local councils, and religious authorities worked in concert to maintain order, integrate diverse populations, and ensure loyalty to the Sultan. This blend of coercion, pragmatism, and institutional innovation allowed the empire to consolidate control over a city that had once resisted conquest for over a millennium. The administrative framework established in the aftermath of the siege became a model for managing other conquered territories, reflecting the broader Ottoman capacity for governance and statecraft. Cultural and religious plurality became a defining feature of post-conquest Istanbul. Christians, Jews, and Muslims coexisted within the city, contributing to its commercial vitality, intellectual life, and artistic expression. Religious tolerance was often pragmatic, aimed at maintaining social order and economic productivity, yet it facilitated a rich cultural environment where traditions intersected. Festivals, markets, and educational institutions reflected this diversity, creating a city that was both historically layered and forward-looking. Military lessons from the siege continued to influence strategy across Europe and the Near East. The deployment of large cannons, the coordination of land and naval forces, and the innovative logistical approaches employed by Mehmed II informed military theory and practice. The fall of Constantinople exemplified the importance of adaptability, intelligence, and technological integration in warfare. It also reinforced the understanding that leadership, morale, and strategic vision could outweigh sheer numerical superiority. The narrative of Constantinople's fall illustrates the intersection of human courage, technological innovation, and historical contingency. Defenders exhibited extraordinary bravery, attempting to hold a city against overwhelming odds. The Ottoman forces combined discipline, planning, and technological superiority to achieve a historic victory. Citizens endured the upheaval, adapting to new rulers and contributing to the city's revival. These interconnected human experiences remind us that history is not only about events, but also about the people whose lives are entwined with them. Economic revival under Ottoman rule transformed the city into a hub of global commerce. Markets and trade centers flourished, linking Istanbul to networks spanning the Mediterranean, the Middle East, and beyond. Artisans, merchants, and entrepreneurs capitalized on new opportunities, contributing to urban growth and prosperity. The Bosporus remained a vital conduit for goods, while maritime innovation ensured that Istanbul's strategic importance endured. This economic vibrancy reinforced the city's centrality within the Ottoman Empire and the wider world. Intellectual and cultural exchanges continued to shape the city's identity. Greek scholars preserved classical knowledge, Islamic scholars contributed religious and scientific insights, and artisans and architects blended traditions in tangible ways. These exchanges produced a dynamic environment that fostered creativity, learning, and cultural synthesis. Istanbul became As Istanbul solidified its role as the heart of the Ottoman Empire, the legacies of 1453 continued to resonate throughout Europe and Asia. Sultan Mehmed II's vision extended beyond mere conquest. He sought to establish a city that could serve as a symbol of imperial power, a hub of administration, and a center of cultural and intellectual life. By blending the traditions of Byzantium with Ottoman governance and Islamic culture, Istanbul became a unique metropolis, bridging continents and civilizations in ways that had never been seen before. The human dimension of this transformation is striking. Survivors of the siege, both Christian and Muslim, adapted to new realities. Families rebuilt their homes, traders reopened shops, and artisans found new patrons among the Ottoman elite. Communities integrated into the urban fabric, preserving traditions while contributing to the city's evolving identity. This adaptive resilience illustrates the capacity of human societies to endure and thrive even after catastrophic upheaval, and underscores the importance of agency in historical processes. Trade flourished under the new administration. The city's strategic location on the Bosporus allowed Ottoman authorities to regulate and profit from the movement of goods between Europe and Asia. Markets and bazaars thrived, offering a diverse array of products from spices and textiles to luxury items and local crafts. Venetian, Genoese, and other European merchants negotiated access under Ottoman regulations, creating a complex web of commerce that enriched both the city and the empire. These economic transformations reinforced Istanbul's centrality in regional and global trade networks. The Ottoman emphasis on education and religion facilitated cultural continuity amidst change. Madrasas educated bureaucrats and religious leaders, while Christian communities were permitted to maintain their churches and schools under the millet system. Religious leaders acted as intermediaries between the state and local populations, ensuring social cohesion and stability. This pragmatic approach enabled the Ottoman administration to manage a diverse population while fostering intellectual and cultural development, illustrating the interplay between governance, social structure, and urban resilience. Architectural innovation continued to define Istanbul's skyline. Ottoman architects drew inspiration from Byzantine engineering, incorporating domes, arches, and structural principles into the construction of mosques, palaces, and public buildings. The Hagia Sophia remained a central reference point, its massive dome inspiring new approaches to design and spatial organization. Over time, the city developed a distinct architectural identity, reflecting both continuity with the past and the creative vision of the Ottoman state. The Fall of Constantinople also reshaped European strategic thinking. The loss of a Christian stronghold on the eastern frontier heightened awareness of vulnerability to Ottoman expansion. European powers invested in fortification design, naval technology, and military innovation to counter potential threats. The siege demonstrated the decisive role of artillery in modern warfare, prompting changes in both offensive and defensive strategies. Military engineers and scholars studied the siege extensively, ensuring that the lessons learned would influence European military doctrine for generations. Intellectually, the migration of Greek scholars had a profound impact on Western Europe. Classical manuscripts, philosophical treatises, and scientific texts enriched Renaissance universities and academies, accelerating developments in literature, science, mathematics, and philosophy. The transmission of knowledge illustrates the complex and often unexpected consequences of conquest. A devastating military event for one society became a catalyst for cultural and intellectual flourishing in another. The cultural synthesis that emerged in Istanbul was also evident in the arts. Byzantine artistic traditions influenced Ottoman religious and civic architecture, while Islamic motifs and design principles introduced new aesthetic dimensions. Public spaces, markets, and religious sites reflected the blending of traditions, creating a city where multiple cultural legacies coexisted and interacted. This dynamic environment fostered creativity, social interaction, and economic vitality, demonstrating the potential for cultural enrichment following conquest. Political stability under Mehmed II and his successors reinforced the city's prominence. Administrative reforms, effective taxation, and urban planning ensured that Istanbul remained the empire's core. The integration of diverse populations into the administrative, economic, and military structures of the empire facilitated governance and social cohesion. This organizational sophistication allowed the Ottomans to maintain control over a complex and multicultural urban center, highlighting the interplay between strategic vision and practical administration in the consolidation of empire. The human stories of survivor and adaptation offer powerful insights. Ordinary citizens navigated the challenges of displacement, loss, and integration, finding ways to rebuild their lives and communities. Their contributions to commerce, culture, and social life helped transform Istanbul into a vibrant metropolis. These experiences underscore the resilience of human societies and the importance of individual and collective agency in shaping historical outcomes, reminding us that history is as much about lived experience as it is about grand events. Economically, Istanbul became a hub for both regional and global trade. The Bosporus facilitated the movement of goods, people, and ideas, connecting Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. Markets thrived, artisans found new patrons, and trade networks expanded. This economic vitality supported the growth of the city, reinforcing its strategic importance and creating opportunities for cultural and intellectual exchange. The city's transformation illustrates the interdependence of political power, economic prosperity, and cultural vitality in shaping urban centers. The Fall of Constantinople also had enduring symbolic significance. It marked the definitive end of the Byzantine Empire and the close of a chapter in European and Christian history. For the Ottoman Empire, it represented a triumph of strategy, technology, and vision. The city became a symbol of imperial power and a center for cultural and intellectual activity. The juxtaposition of loss and renewal, despair and opportunity highlights the multifaceted consequences of historical events and the complex interplay of human agency, technology, and circumstance. The architectural legacy of the city reflects this transformative period. Ottoman structures incorporated Byzantine engineering techniques, creating buildings of remarkable grandeur and functional sophistication. Public spaces, mosques, palaces, and fortifications demonstrated both aesthetic refinement and strategic design. The fusion of architectural traditions illustrates the continuity of human ingenuity and the creative adaptation of conquered cultural forms, contributing to Istanbul's identity as a city shaped by layers of history. Cultural and intellectual life flourished in the wake of the conquest. Greek scholars preserved and transmitted knowledge, while Ottoman scholars contributed religious, scientific, and philosophical insights. Artisans and architects blended traditions, producing innovations in design, craftsmanship, and urban planning. These exchanges created a dynamic environment that fostered learning, creativity, and cultural expression, illustrating the potential for enrichment even after dramatic political upheaval. The human consequences of the siege also highlight resilience and adaptation. Citizens endured siege, displacement, and regime change, yet rebuilt their lives, communities, and institutions. Their ingenuity and perseverance transformed Istanbul into a thriving urban center, demonstrating the capacity of societies to recover from catastrophe. The experiences of these individuals remind us that history is not solely determined by leaders and empires, but by the countless people whose lives intersect with and shape the course of events. Trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchange reinforced the city's global significance. Merchants and diplomats navigated complex networks of economic and political relationships, facilitating the flow of goods, ideas, and influence. Istanbul became a nexus of global interaction, connecting regions and civilizations in ways that had lasting implications for commerce, culture, and international relations. The Fall of Constantinople also had enduring symbolic significance. It marked the definitive end of the Byzantine Empire and the close of a chapter in European and Christian history. For the Ottoman Empire, it represented a triumph of strategy, technology, and vision. The city became a symbol of imperial power and a center for cultural and intellectual activity. The Ottoman emphasis on education and religion facilitated cultural continuity. Madrasas educated bureaucrats and religious leaders, while Christian communities were permitted to maintain their churches and schools under the millet system. Religious leaders acted as intermediaries between the state and local populations, ensuring social cohesion and stability. This pragmatic approach enabled the Ottoman administration to manage a diverse population while fostering intellectual and cultural development, illustrating the interplay between governance, social structure, and urban resilience. Architectural innovation continued to define Istanbul's skyline. Ottoman architects drew inspiration from Byzantine engineering, incorporating domes, arches, and structural principles into the construction of mosques, palaces, and public buildings. The Hagia Sophia remained a central reference point, its massive dome inspiring new approaches to design and spatial organization. Over time, the city developed a distinct architectural identity, reflecting both continuity with the past and the creative vision of the Ottoman state. The Fall of Constantinople also reshaped European strategic thinking. The loss of a Christian stronghold on the eastern frontier heightened awareness of vulnerability to Ottoman expansion. European powers invested in fortification design, naval technology, and military innovation to counter potential threats. The siege demonstrated the decisive role of artillery in modern warfare, prompting changes in both offensive and defensive strategies. Military engineers and scholars studied the siege extensively, ensuring that the lessons learned would influence European military